Dresden had survived while Europe burned. For more than 5 years of total war, the city remained almost untouched, an island of calm in a continent drowning in ruins. While Hamburg was erased, while Cologne collapsed, while Berlin suffocated under constant bombardment, Dresden stood intact along the Elbe River, its skyline unbroken, its streets still alive. It was known as the Florence of the Elbe, a city defined by culture rather than industry, by music rather than machines. Baroque domes rose above the river. Opera houses still echoed with sound. Museums preserved centuries of art. The war felt distant here, almost unreal. This illusion of safety turned Dresden into a magnet. By late 1944 and early 1945, the city was overflowing with refugees fleeing the Eastern Front. The Red Army was advancing relentlessly through Poland and into German territory, pushing millions of civilians westward. Trains arrived daily, crammed beyond capacity, unloading families carrying children, suitcases, blankets, and fear. They slept in stations, schools, churches, and basements. The population of Dresden nearly doubled in a matter of months. The city was no longer just a cultural center. It had become a sanctuary. People believed the Allies would spare it. There were reasons for that belief. Dresden had no major armament factories. No oil refineries. No large military headquarters. Its defenses were weak. Anti-aircraft guns were scarce. Searchlights limited. Fighter cover almost non-existent. Allied bombers had passed overhead many times on their way to other targets and never stopped. The message seemed clear. Dresden was not worth destroying. That belief spread quietly and deeply. It settled into daily routines. Children went to school. Theaters reopened despite shortages. Music continued to play in halls filled with refugees and locals alike. Even as the Third Reich collapsed around them, Dresden felt protected by its irrelevance. But by early 1945, the war had changed. The Allies no longer fought for gradual attrition. They fought for speed and finality. The Western Allies and the Soviet Union were racing toward the same end, and coordination between fronts became critical. Germany's transportation network was one of its last remaining lifelines. Trains moved troops, supplies, refugees, and communications. Dresden, sitting at a key junction between East and West, North and South, was suddenly important not for what it produced, but for what passed through it. In British and American planning rooms, maps were studied carefully. Dresden was marked with calm, professional certainty. The objective was not precision bombing. The objective was paralysis. The city's architecture made it ideal for a new kind of warfare. Narrow medieval streets. Dense residential blocks. Buildings filled with wood, furniture, fabrics, and people. The bomb load was selected with intent. First, high explosive bombs to rip open roofs, shatter windows, and expose interiors. Then incendiaries, tens of thousands of them, small and efficient, designed to ignite fires that could not be controlled. The goal was not just destruction. It was a firestorm. A self-sustaining inferno that would consume oxygen, generate hurricane-force winds, and kill anyone trapped inside. The weather conditions were perfect. Clear skies. Low winds. Visibility ideal for pathfinders. The night chosen was deliberate. February 13, 1945. A city filled with refugees. A city unprepared. A city that still believed it was safe. That evening, Dresden went about its routines. Most people were indoors. It was cold. Children slept wrapped in coats and blankets in overcrowded apartments and shelters. Sirens were unreliable and often ignored. False alarms had trained people to doubt them. When the first warning sounded shortly after 10 p.m., many hesitated. Some stayed where they were. Others moved slowly toward shelters that had never been tested under real attack. There was no panic yet. No sense of scale. No understanding of what was coming. At 10:13 p.m., the first wave arrived. From the west, hundreds of RAF Lancaster bombers filled the sky. They were unseen until flares fell, illuminating the city in a ghostly white light. Dresden was suddenly exposed, frozen in clarity, marked for destruction. Within seconds, high explosive bombs began to fall. They smashed through rooftops, collapsed buildings, severed water mains, and killed thousands instantly. People were buried alive before they understood they were under attack. The city's infrastructure failed almost immediately. Streets became impassable. Fire crews were overwhelmed before they could respond. Then came the incendiaries. They fell like rain, tens of thousands of small burning weapons igniting homes, attics, furniture, clothing, bodies. Fires spread rapidly through broken buildings. Smoke-filled streets and shelters. The air began to thin. But this was still only the opening act. Dresden had not yet experienced the true horror. It had not yet entered the firestorm. That moment was approaching. And when it arrived, the city would disappear. The first wave ended, but the city had no time to understand what had happened. Dresden was burning in hundreds of isolated fires, scattered but growing, feeding on shattered buildings and exposed interiors. The water system was crippled. Mains were broken. Fire hydrants were useless. Firefighters fought blindly through smoke and debris, their efforts meaningless against the scale of ignition. But the true catastrophe had not yet begun. At 1:21 a.m., the second wave arrived. This time, the bombers came lower and more accurately. Pathfinders marked the already burning city with fresh flares, transforming Dresden into a glowing target visible for miles. The second wave was designed to complete the process. High explosives struck first, collapsing remaining structures and blocking streets with rubble, trapping those still trying to escape. Shelters filled with smoke. People suffocated underground, never touched by flame. Then came the incendiaries again, denser and more concentrated than before. Fires merged. Streets became corridors of heat. The temperature rose rapidly, far beyond what the human body could endure. A firestorm was forming. As the flames consumed oxygen, air was drawn violently toward the center. Winds reached hurricane force, ripping doors from hinges, pulling people off their feet, dragging them into walls of fire. Children were torn from their parents' arms. People clung to lampposts, railings, anything solid, only to be burned where they stood. The sound was no longer explosions. It was a continuous roar, like a living creature feeding. The sky glowed orange and white. Sparks and burning debris were sucked upward, then rained back down, igniting new fires. The streets themselves seemed to burn. Asphalt softened. Bodies collapsed mid-stride. Clothing ignited instantly. Many died without visible burns, suffocated as oxygen vanished from the air. Shelters became ovens. People pressed deeper inside, believing thicker walls meant safety. Instead, heat penetrated everything. Concrete cracked. Metal warped. Would burst into flame without contact. The city's geography worked against its people. Narrow medieval streets funneled wind, intensifying the firestorm. Courtyards became traps. Basements filled with smoke and toxic gases. Families died together, huddled in darkness, holding hands until breathing stopped. Above ground, chaos reigned. Civilians ran toward the Elbe River, believing water offered salvation. The riverbanks filled with thousands. Some jumped in desperation. Many drowned, weakened by heat and smoke. Others survived only to watch the city burn from the water, surrounded by floating bodies and burning debris. Now, Dresden was no longer a city. It was a single, massive inferno visible from over 100 miles away. The temperature at the center reached levels comparable to a blast furnace. Anyone caught there had no chance. The elderly collapsed. Children vanished in seconds. Refugees who had fled one front of the war died in another, far from home, unnamed and uncounted. When the bombers finally turned away, they left behind something unprecedented. A complete urban firestorm, self-sustaining and unstoppable. The flames continued to burn long after the aircraft were gone, feeding on everything combustible. The night stretched on endlessly for those still alive. Time lost meaning. There was only heat, smoke, and terror. As dawn approached, the firestorm began to weaken, not because it had been extinguished, but because there was little left to burn. By morning, the heart of Dresden was gone. Where streets and buildings once stood, there was only ash, twisted metal, and silence. The sun rose over a city that no longer existed. And tens of thousands were already dead. By now, Dresden was no longer a city. It was a single, massive inferno visible from over 100 miles away. The temperature at the center reached levels comparable to a blast furnace. Anyone caught there had no chance. The elderly collapsed. Children vanished in seconds. Refugees who had fled one front of the war died in another, far from home, unnamed and uncounted. When the bombers finally turned away, they left behind something unprecedented. A complete urban firestorm, self-sustaining and unstoppable. The flames continued to burn long after the aircraft were gone, feeding on everything combustible. The night stretched on endlessly for those still alive. Time lost meaning. There was only heat, smoke, and terror. As dawn approached, the firestorm began to weaken, not because it had been extinguished, but because there was little left to burn. By morning, the heart of Dresden was gone. Where streets and buildings once stood, there was only ash, twisted metal, and silence. The sun rose over a city that no longer existed. And tens of thousands were already dead. Morning did not bring relief to Dresden. It revealed the scale of annihilation. The smoke thinned just enough for survivors to see what remained of their world. The city center was flattened. Buildings reduced to skeletal walls. Blackened stone still radiated heat. The air carried a bitter smell that would linger for weeks, a mixture of ash, chemicals, and burned flesh. Streets were unrecognizable. Landmarks were gone. Names meant nothing anymore. Those who emerged from shelters did so cautiously, blinded by light after hours in darkness, stunned by silence. Where there had been screaming, fire, and wind, there was now an unnatural quiet. Bodies lay everywhere, piled in streets, collapsed in doorways, fused together in postures of escape. Some were reduced to shadows, burned into stone. Many were impossible to identify. The heat had erased faces, clothing, even bone. Dresden's authorities no longer functioned. Hospitals were destroyed. Doctors were dead or overwhelmed. There was no electricity, no water, no communication. The city was cut off from the world and from itself. Survivors wandered aimlessly, searching for family members, calling names into ruins that offered no response. Children cried beside bodies that would never answer. The Elbe River flowed silently past the devastation, carrying debris and the dead downstream. The scale of death was impossible to comprehend. Counters failed. Estimations varied wildly. Tens of thousands were gone, erased in a single night. Many were refugees who would never be listed in any registry, their names unknown, their lives undocumented. The city attempted order where none existed. Mass cremations began because burial was impossible. Piles of bodies were burned in public squares. The smoke rose again, darker now, heavier, not from bombs but from necessity. The stench of death became part of the city's identity. Survivors spoke of ghosts. They claimed to hear voices beneath rubble, cries that faded as hours passed. Rescue teams dug with bare hands until exhaustion forced them to stop. More often than not, they found silence. The trauma was immediate and total. People stared without expression. Some laughed uncontrollably. Others collapsed, unable to speak. The human mind, pushed beyond comprehension, fractured. But the destruction was not finished. On February 14, as survivors tried to process what had happened, the bombers returned. This time, American aircraft struck what little remained. The targets were rail yards, bridges, and infrastructure. But bombs fell among ruins anyway. Any sense of safety vanished. The message was clear. There would be no pause. No mercy. The war would consume everything until nothing was left. The final raid sealed Dresden's fate. The city that had survived centuries of wars, fires, and floods had been undone in 48 hours. When the bombing ended, Dresden was a hollowed corpse of stone and ash. The cultural heart of Germany was dead. News of the destruction spread slowly. Germany's propaganda machine attempted to downplay it. Allied leaders avoided discussion. The numbers were inconvenient. The images too disturbing. News of the destruction spread slowly. Germany's propaganda machine attempted to downplay it. Allied leaders avoided discussion. The numbers were inconvenient. The images too disturbing. Dresden became an uncomfortable subject, even among the victors. For the survivors, debates meant nothing. They had lived through hell. They had watched the sky fall. The city that had symbolized beauty and heritage was now a warning, etched into history with fire. And yet, even in the ruins, life persisted. People shared food. Shelter was built from debris. Communities formed among ashes. Not from hope, but from necessity. Dresden breathed again, wounded beyond recognition, but alive. The firestorm had failed to erase humanity, even as it destroyed the city. And the question remained, unspoken but unavoidable. Was this destruction necessary? Was Dresden a military target, or a demonstration of power? History would argue for decades. But for those who stood among the ruins, the answer was written in ash, carved into memory, and burned into the ground where their city once stood. News of the destruction spread slowly. Germany's propaganda machine attempted to downplay it. Allied leaders avoided discussion. The numbers were inconvenient. The images too disturbing. Dresden became an uncomfortable subject, even among the victors. For the survivors, debates meant nothing. They had lived through hell. They had watched the sky fall. The city that had symbolized beauty and heritage was now a warning, etched into history with fire. And yet, even in the ruins, life persisted. People shared food. Shelter was built from debris. Communities formed among ashes. Not from hope, but from necessity. Dresden breathed again, wounded beyond recognition, but alive. The firestorm had failed to erase humanity, even as it destroyed the city. And the question remained, unspoken but unavoidable. Was this destruction necessary? Was Dresden a military target, or a demonstration of power? History would argue for decades. But for those who stood among the ruins, the answer was written in ash, carved into memory, and burned into the ground where their city once stood. This contradiction haunted post-war narratives. Historians debated numbers. Motives were dissected. Politics reshaped memory. But the truth of Dresden resisted simplification. It existed in survivor testimony, in scars passed from parent to child, in the empty spaces where streets once lived. Dresden challenged the idea of clean war. It forced a reckoning with industrialized destruction, where technology magnified suffering beyond human scale. The firestorm was not an accident. It was engineered. A calculated method refined through trial, perfected over cities like Hamburg, and unleashed with devastating efficiency. Dresden was its most infamous expression. The lesson was brutal. War had evolved beyond battlefields. Civilians were no longer collateral. They were targets, whether acknowledged or not. Today, Dresden stands rebuilt, beautiful once more. Yet beneath the restored facades lies a buried city, a memory sealed in ash. The Frauenkirche, reconstructed from its fallen stones, stands not as a symbol of triumph, but of remembrance. Each blackened stone preserved within its walls is a silent witness. The night of February 13, 1945, did not end with the fires dying. It continues in questions humanity still struggles to answer. How far can destruction go before victory loses meaning? When does survival become indistinguishable from defeat? Dresden does not offer easy answers. It offers a warning. One written in flame, silence, and loss. If this story matters, if history deserves to be remembered in its full, uncomfortable truth, then remember Dresden. Not as propaganda. Not as justification. But as a reminder of what happens when war is allowed to consume everything. And if you believe stories like this should never be forgotten, join Bloodlines of Empires. Subscribe, share, and keep these memories alive. Because history buried is history repeated.